Hello to one and all. Welcome to Edupedia world. Today we are going to cover the topic recruitment and placement, specifically job analysis. Now the human resource management process really begins with deciding what the job entails. And the main purpose of this session is to show you how to analyze a job and write job descriptions. You will learn how important it is to analyze jobs as it determines what the job entails and what kind of people the firm should hire for the job. So let's begin the session. Now, the importance of a job analysis. Before we go ahead and discuss the importance, let's understand what does job analysis actually mean. So basically, job analysis is a procedure through which you determine the duties of the positions that you have in a company and the characteristics of the people that you want to hire for these positions. And what do you do out of a job analysis? What do you do or what do you get out of a job analysis? So two things specifically. One is the job description. The other is a job specification. Now I will discuss in detail the difference between the two, the difference between job description and job specification. But let's just talk about this diagram first. So if you look at this figure, we have basically so what we understand is out of the job analysis, we get a job description and a job specification, right? So once you get a job description and job specification, how does that help us hire the right people, right? So one is, yes, it helps with recruitment and selection, definitely, because a job description is the first thing that you would require when you're recruiting somebody. So a job analysis provides information of what duties the job entails and what characteristics or what kind of education details, those kind of specifications are required to perform these activities. And these descriptions and specifications, they help managers decide what sort of people to recruit and hire. Then we have it also helps with compensation, right? To evaluate the compensation. Now, how does that help us in compensation? So compensation usually depends on the job's required skill and the education level. What sort of safety hazards a job has. So obviously, if you are working in the mines, right, that is obviously got a lot of safety hazards. It's a matter of life and death. So that also comes into picture when you have to decide on a compensation of a particular position. Then of course the degree of responsibility that you need to carry with the job and so on. There are so many factors that you can assess the job with. So job analysis basically provides the information to determine the relative worth of that particular job or of each job. So for that, a job description and job specification is important to decide how much you're going to pay a person for this particular job, right? Then we have, it helps with training, right? Because the job description, yes, it lists the job specific duties and the skills. So therefore, we would also be able to analyze what kind of training we would need to give, once we hire the person, because there are certain skills which, of course, can be trained, right? And it may not be in the person as and when he comes into the company, right? So that helps us create training material and decide when to train and what to train once the employee joins the organization. Then it helps with the performance appraisal. Now, performance appraisal compares each employee's actual performance with his or her performance standards. So where do these standards come from? So to understand those standards, you need to have a knowledge of the job's duties and standards. So then what managers do is they use the job analysis to learn what these duties and standards are and then compare the performance of the employee. So a job description, job specification helps in these particular situations. So another thing that I haven't mentioned in this chart is job analysis also helps managers. Sometimes what happens is you discover unassigned duties, right? Some things that are not usually mentioned in an organization chart or not mentioned in a particular job description. So they usually reveal unassigned duties. So for example, if I have to take an example of a factory or a manufacturing company. So there's a production manager, okay, and she says that she's responsible for a dozen or so duties, and such as they're responsible for production scheduling, raw material purchasing, and so on. Now, as a job analyst, right, I would say, okay, you are responsible for raw material purchasing, but who is responsible for managing these raw material inventories? So you start figuring out, okay, who is responsible for this particular job, and then you start talking to all the other people in the manufacturing company, and it seems that nobody is actually responsible for inventory management. So what you've done here is you have uncovered an essential duty, right, an unassigned duty that nobody was actually taking care of. So you've actually discovered something that is there, it's part of the job, somebody needs to be taking care of it, and now thanks to job analysis you have discovered that. Moving on, like I said earlier, let's understand what the difference between a job description and a job specification is. Okay, so basically a job description is the list of what the job entails, right? The job title, the job location, what kind of responsibilities a person will handle, and so on, so the working conditions, the duties, the specific duties of the job basically. Specifications basically are the characteristics or what kind of people you want to hire for the job. So the human requirements basically, like your education, skills, personality, and so on. Whereas job description will have even your who you'll be reporting to, how many people you'll be working with, or if there's a specific if you need to be working in some different location other than your company, all those details would come under a job description. Yeah. Now before we go ahead to the next topic, I'd like to show you some of the job description examples so you can better place what you've just learned or what I've been speaking about into actual examples, right? Into real life examples. So I've just opened these particular websites so that it's faster for me to take the class. Let's just go to the Goldman Sachs page. So this is an example of basically this is the Goldman Sachs careers web page, and this is for a finance analyst position, right? A corporate treasury analyst position in Hong Kong. As you can see, they have the job ID mentioned, the job location, whether it's full-time or part-time, right? There is no standard format. Every company has its own way, but there are these specific set of details that are there in every job description. So now if you look at it, they've mentioned the job summary and responsibility. So now this basically is your job description, right? And if you see, the corporate treasury works closely with the CFO, so as I was talking about the relationship, right? And they would be working with other members of senior management to manage the firm's funding, liquidity, etc., etc. Then if you go down to responsibilities, you'll see they need to develop, implement global regional liquidity risk management. They need to measure and monitor, size and manage the firm's liquidity pool, and so on. So these are basically the job description. What are the job duties that the person needs to perform? Then you come down to the basic qualifications, right? Which is they need to have experience in risk management, funding. They need to be a self-starter. They need to have the ability to analyze, prioritize. They need to have the ability to interact with and build relationships, strong verbal, written communications. These are all the characteristics of the person. This is not something that is, it's not the job description, right? It is not about the job that they have to do. It is basically their own personal traits, right? Having good communication skills. Sorry, just a second. Having good communication skills, having experience prior to this particular field, being a self-starter, being able to analyze. These are basically the job specifications, right? Now, if I have to show you another example, this is the IKEA job, right? We had taken IKEA as an example earlier as well. Now, if you look at the IKEA web page, the careers page, here also see, if you see, they have a lot of similarities, right, between the Goldman Sachs job description and the IKEA job description. So if you see, the job title is given location, country, whereas full-time, part-time, work area, all that is mentioned even in the Goldman Sachs job description. Also, although the format isn't exactly the same, but it has the same specifications. So of course here they have a different way of hiring, and of course this, like I mentioned in the previous lesson, it's a strategy. It's one of your strategies. You need to come and you need to make sure your job description is well thought out and make it more attractive, so that somebody looks at job description and they want to join your company. Anyway, that's a different thing altogether, but today I'm just going to talk to you about the job description. So about the job, right? So they've mentioned to secure a positive shopping experience for our customers and to provide an attractive day for the whole family. So if you see, they've actually imbibed IKEA's values into the job description. And as for the assignment, I'm so sorry about that again. Their tasks will include, so ensure timely, accurate delivery, check and verify customer orders, assemble furniture, communicate the IKEA returns policy. All this is basically part of the job description. Your profile, that is your knowledge, skills, experience, capabilities, motivation, these are all part of the job specification, right? Having good mathematical ability, customer service experience, basic computer skills, basic math skills, all this is part of the job specification. And then of course they have mentioned about what kind of place IKEA is to work with and a little bit about themselves. So you can add as many information as you like into the job description, because the main thing is you need to make it as attractive as possible for applicants out there. So as you can see, they even have additional information. So basically a number of hours they need to work per week, and also that requires night shifts. So if there are specific information or additional information that someone needs to know, like in this case the number of hours and the number of, and specifically night shifts, it's better to put that in the job description, because tomorrow you don't want to waste time interviewing and you find this brilliant candidate and then they say, oh, we're not ready to work on Saturday and Sunday, or I won't be available for night shifts, right? So it's better to kind of put it all out there in the job description so that you get the right candidates. That's basically the whole point of having a job description. I've taken a third example, which is Ford India, and this is basically for a product development engineer. So as you can see, again, similar entries. They have a job title, they have a job description, they mention the country, location below. Now here, if you see, the difference is they have clubbed the job description and the specification together, right? So they mentioned they need to do so and so, prepare and review DVP and R. They need to identify identify certain things, support resolution, ability to interface, all of that. And they've also mentioned excellent communication skills. They need to have the ability to interface with cross-functional teams. So all that is actually a job specification. It's not a job description. So it's actually always better to separate the two, right? So it's easier for someone to understand the job description. You should make sure that it's clear and concise. Anyway, getting back to the presentation, moving on. So, the steps in job analysis, right? How do we go about creating or basically creating a job analysis? So first is decide how you're going to use this information, because like I'm showed in the examples, this is going to determine the data that you collect and how you collect them. So some data collection techniques like interviewing the employee, asking what the job entails, they're good for writing job descriptions and selecting employees for the job. Then you need to review relevant background information, right? Such as your organization charts, your process charts, your previous job descriptions. Because organization charts can show the organization-wide division of work and how the job, relates to the other jobs and where the job fits in the overall organization, who reports to whom, So that's very important when you need to create the job description. When I showed you the examples, it was clearly written, right? Who they need to work with, who they need to report to, what kind of team that they will be working with. So unless you actually review some background information, you're not going to get that information. So step 3 would be to select representative positions, right? There may be too many people with similar jobs, right? And there might be around 200, 300 people who do the same job. So what you need to do is you need to get a sample of 10 people, right? A good sample of 10 people. If they are from different departments, take them from different departments and then kind of do a job analysis on that. Step 4 would be actually analyzing the job, right? So once you get all this information, sit down, by collecting this data, sit down and understand what is this data that you've collected. Basically, it requires what kind of employee behaviors, what kind of working conditions, what kind of human traits and abilities is needed to perform this particular job. One is understanding, yes, the job requires the person to, create so and so things and analyze so and so things and day-to-day activities, you mentioned all that. But to do that kind of work, what kind of traits does an employee need to have? That's very important. Then you need to verify, after all of that, you need to verify this job analysis information with the worker that is performing the job. And then once they are happy with it, or they say, okay, that's exactly what I do, go ahead and show it to the immediate supervisor. And then at the end, of course, after all this, there's a go-ahead from all of them. You can go ahead and develop a job description and job specification, right? So next is some guidelines, right? When you are doing a job analysis, some guidelines on how to get started. First is you make sure that the job analysis is a joint effort, right? By both the human resource specialist and the worker's supervisor. Second is if there are several employees doing the same job in different departments, make sure you do a job analysis from different employees in different departments, right? It's better not to just stick to one department. You get a broader perspective when it's different departments. Make sure that the questions and the processes are clear to the employees, because it's not going to help you if you ask, some really big question and the employee doesn't understand what the question actually means, and then you don't really get the answer that you're looking for. So, and then finally, use several different tools for the job analysis, right? Do not just try on one particular tool, like say just do a questionnaire and then say, okay, I've done the analysis. It's always better to combine, club, various methods. Of course, I'll be discussing the methods of job analysis right after this. It's better to club a couple of these, methods together so that you get the right analysis done. Next we come to the job analysis methods for collection, right? So like I mentioned in the previous slide, there are different methods to do a job analysis, and it's better to club different methods. So if you start with the qualitative method of collection, right? So first and foremost, the most common method we all know about is the interview. So it can be either unstructured interviews or a structured interview. Now, what does unstructured interview mean? It could be you going up to the supervisor or the person who's handling the job and just ask very open-ended questions, like tell me about your job, or what is the job being performed, or what are the job's responsibilities and duties, what are the job's physical demands, right? Very open-ended questions, not specific questions. Whereas highly structured questions contain hundreds of specific items to check off, right? So you go, there is a structure, a checklist format to guide the interview. Now, managers may conduct individual interviews with each employee, and they also may conduct group interviews with groups of employees who have the same job, and supervisor interviews with one or more supervisors who know the job. So there are different ways to start the interview process, and they usually use the group interviews when a large number of employees are performing similar or identical work. So since it can be a very quick and an inexpensive way to gather information, this is found quite suitable, especially when you have a huge number of people doing the same job. And as a rule, it is important that the immediate supervisor attends this group session. Otherwise, you can always interview the supervisor separately to get his or her perspective on the job's duties and responsibilities. Now, when it comes to structured interviews, it includes a series of questions regarding matters like general purpose of the job, supervisory responsibilities, job duties, education, experience, skills required, and so on. So, the pros and cons of an interview is, of course, the interview has a lot of advantages. It's simple, it's a quick way to collect information, and it includes information that might not appear on a written form. And also you can always find out important activities that occur occasionally, or informal contacts that wouldn't be there on the organization chart. So like I'd given that earlier example of the production manager, right? How we had figured out, okay, there was nobody to handle the inventory. You also, sometimes what happens is while you're talking to an employee, he or she might vent out frustrations, right, that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. So when you start talking to a candidate, not to a candidate, but to an employee about the job that he or she is doing, there might be some issues that they're facing with the job. And as an HR professional, that is actually, valid or substantial information, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your employees are happy, right? So you will end up figuring out things that you might have not figured out otherwise. Then, of course, we have questionnaires. Yeah. Now, questionnaires also, of course, can be structured and unstructured. And having employees fill out questionnaires to describe their duties and responsibilities is another way to obtain job analysis information. And you need to decide how structured the questionnaire should be and what questions to include. And he or she would be asked to indicate whether or not that they perform each task. If that person performs a task, then how much time is spent on each task. And the questionnaire can also be open-ended, right? Like I said, it's both structured and unstructured. So you can simply ask the employee to describe the major duties of your job. So the best questionnaire usually falls between these two extremes, yeah. And a questionnaire is usually quick and an efficient way to obtain information from a large number of employees. It's less costly, of course, than interviewing hundreds of workers, for instance. And but although developing the questionnaire and testing it can be really time consuming, so that is one con of the questionnaire. Then we have the observation method, right? So direct observation is especially useful when the jobs consist mainly of observable physical activities. So for example, if you take an assembly line worker or an accounting clerk, right? These are jobs that you can observe and understand what they do, but it may not be appropriate for a job that requires a lot of mental activity. So say an example of a design engineer or a lawyer, right? Nor is it useful for employees who occasionally engage in important activities. Now say if you take a nurse, right? A nurse may not be handling emergencies all the time, so it may not be the right method to actually find out what their job description is. Also another issue is that we usually use the term reactivity for these cases. So when an employee knows that you are observing what they do on a day-to-day basis, they may change what they actually do from what they normally do because they know they're being observed, right? So that can also be a problem, So you may not know exactly, in reality what actually happens. And so managers often use direct observation and interviewing together. So that is also a good way, combining the two, observation and interview. So you can probably observe the worker on the job and then at the same time ask that person a couple of questions. So you can take note of the job activities, as well as you can also, in between, if you have a doubt, you can ask the person to clarify the points that you have not understood, or to explain what other activities he or she performs, right, that you did not observe. So using these two methods, and asking the questions while the worker performs his or her job is also another method. Then we have the participant diary and logs. Basically, here we ask workers to keep a diary or log of what they do during the day. So for every activity that they engage in, the employee records the activity in a log, right? And this can produce a very complete picture of the job, especially when this is combined with an interview afterwards. So you get an idea of its day-to-day, hour by hour log of responsibilities and duties. Although there might be situations where the employee might exaggerate some of their activities, but then because it is chronological in nature, that tends to mediate against this. So first, today it has gone high tech, diaries and logs. So sometimes some firms they give employees pocket dictating machines and pages, so that becomes easier for employees to record their day-to-day activities. Then we have, so of course, qualitative methods like interviews, questionnaires are great methods, but they're not always suitable. So for example, if your aim is to compare jobs for pay purposes, right? Just listing out the duties is not going to help, right? If you want to decide what kind of salary does this particular job we would need to pay for this particular job, or when you want to compare two jobs, right, in which case do we have to give a higher compensation, then in those cases we would have to go into a quantitative approach. So the first method is the position analysis questionnaire, which is the PAQ. So it is actually one of the most popular quantitative job analysis tools, and it focuses on general worker behavior instead of the task. And it contains 194 questions about work behavior, work conditions, and job characteristics. So this questionnaire is usually used to collect quantifiable data, right, concerning the duties and responsibilities of various jobs. I right now don't have a format of the PAQ, but feel free to go on the internet, and I'm sure you would find a particular format. So what it's basically, it's a form that employees need to fill, and they need to rate the tasks that are given. So for example, if the first question is written materials, right? That is reports, office notes, job descriptions. How much of that do you do, right? So there is a rating, right, which is, say, NA means not applicable, 1 is nominal or very infrequent, 2 is occasional, 3 is moderate, 4 is considerable, 5 is very substantial. So if your job requires a lot of written material, right, then of course you put in a 4 or a 5 depending on how important it is. If your job requires you to interact with different departments on a daily basis, then again you would have a 4 or a 5. If your job doesn't have any analytical requirements or any analytical responsibilities, then you obviously put any or a 1, depending on which is more relevant. So basically that's how the PAQ or the position analysis questionnaire works, and then this is compared to find out how exactly does it weigh with the other jobs. The other method is the functional job analysis, right? This is basically one of the another method actually where the analysis is done on what the worker does in relation to data, people, and jobs. So basically 3 things. But today, of course, the most recent version uses 7 scales. Earlier, the functional job analysis used to use 3 scales, which is data, people, and things. Now it has become 7 scales. So there is data, people, things, worker instructions, reasoning, math, and language. So basically, by doing the FJA, we find out what the worker does in relation to these different scales, what methods and techniques the worker uses, what machines and tools and equipment the worker uses, right? So under these 7 scales, they are in the order of, in an ascending order. So 0 to how many ever, basically how many ever categories are there. So 0 being, the highest is high, and say a 6 or a 7 would be lows for each column. So say in all of these 7 scales, right, if they've got like a 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, right, that's pretty high. If that means the person requires a higher mental ability to do these jobs. Whereas if it was all the lows, that is the 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 6, it goes that way, then so it's much easier to kind of understand the basic functions that illustrate the person's job, and then determine how much of pay the particular job requires. So that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope you've enjoyed this session. We would be covering human resource planning and recruiting in the next session. Stay tuned for it. Thank you so much again for listening.